Hello, welcome back to my channel and to my Pier Paolo Pasolini retrospective. And today we've reached Pochile, or Pigsty, a very controversial and not much liked film. Now, I want to start by telling you an anecdote. A friend of mine had dinner with another friend of his who had been to Cambridge and been educated at Cambridge University in the arts. And he'd been educated at that sort of high watermark of discussions of the relativity of truth, the fact that history was a construct, that we can never really know the past, we can never really reconstruct it, we can only understand it as a text through other texts, that most of objective fact is a lie because we cannot know so much truth. Most truth is hidden from us, so we can only talk about what is true as what we can know. So my friend said to this guy, he said, well, look, let's say at the end of the Second World War, the Nazis knew their number was up. So they bulldozed the camps. They hid all the bodies, they buried all the bodies, they got rid of all the notation, all the plans. They got rid of all the data about the train stations and how people had been moved and where they'd been taken from. Basically covered up all the information. Would that mean that the Holocaust never happened? And the man's rather chilling answer, in my opinion, was yes. Now, I don't know about you, but that fills me with horror. And the reason I recall that story is that it reminded me of the end of this movie. At the end of this movie, a character played by Jean-Pierre Léaud, he's the son of a wealthy industrialist. And I can't talk about this movie without giving spoilers, so go and watch the film before watching this review. But basically, this guy has a predilection for pigs. Sexual predilection. He likes hanging around with pigs. This is an allegory, my friends, and it is not a subtle one, right? And what has happened is he gets into the pigsty, and the pigs eat him. They attack him and eat him. And this industrialist, who is going to be embarrassed, potentially, by his partner's son being found out to be into pigs, says, well, is there anything left of him? You know, is there any hair, any teeth, any bones, any evidence? And the peasants who work the pigsty say, no, he's completely gone. And the industrialist says, and of course the whole thing is an allegory for how Pasolini perceives that this great, post-war consumerist capitalist juggernaut that is West Germany covers up completely its Nazi past and continues on into the future. That's a pretty heavy start to this video, isn't it? But this is where Pasolini does get heavy, right? These are where the shadows of Salo start to come towards us. What we see here is a development from Teorema. This is another modernist film, and it's very similar. Right, so it picks up on the start of Oedipus Rex, where, if you remember, we start off in modern-day Italy, and then this morphs into this kind of eternal past, where the Oedipus Rex story is played out, but it mirrors the developments in the modern world. Similarly here, we have a two-part modernist diptych-style story, where the main story is about this Jean-Pierre Léaud character. He's the son of a wealthy German industrialist. It's a very anti-German film, this. It could almost be anti-German propaganda. I don't know how German viewers feel about it, actually. But it's a very, very cynical film about the development of West Germany after the war. Anyway. So he's the son of a wealthy German industrialist. Incidentally, all the Germans are played by French people, which is a bit odd. Anyway. And he has this secret that he's interested in pigs. And meanwhile, his father is, at loggerheads with this other major industrialist, and they're business rivals and competitors. And so this is an allegory of how modern Germany has developed. This business competitor is called Herr Hitler, Heil Hitler. It's not very subtle, guys. It's not very subtle. But this is mirrored in a very peculiar way with a more fantastical Oedipus Rex storyline set in this never-never world that Pasolini has started to create through his movies. It's all filmed on the sides of Mount Etna in this fantastic sulphurous ash lava landscape. And it's sort of timeless. It sort of seems medieval, but it's kind of timeless and eternal, just like the wastes that the father figure wandered out into at the end of Teorema. And through these wastes wanders Pierre Clementi, who was a well-known a French actor at the time. I think he had some Italian blood in him, who was always involved in these really outlandish, counterculture revolutionary movies. He's in Makavejev's Sweet movie, if you've ever seen that, where he has sex in a great big bed full of sugar. Anyway, so yes, he likes this kind of movie. And in this movie, right, he starts out as this guy, he's like a sort of savage, and he's out in the wild, and he eats butterflies and worms, and he gets sick. And eventually, he kills someone, and he becomes a cannibal, and he eats them. Then he pairs up with Franco Chitti, somewhat improbably, it has to be said, but they become this gang, and they go around killing people and eating them. And eventually the local town, particularly the church authorities, decide that they have to be stopped. So there's two people are sent out as bait to capture them. And Clementi is captured. But Clementi does not repent. He says, I ate flesh and I am living in joy, or something. And this is contrasted with Leo's character. Leo is rebelling, but Leo is rebelling against social and moral norms because of a predilection, because of something inside him that he can control. Clementi is rebelling against society just because he's the ultimate avatar of rebellion. He's a cannibal, he kills, and he has no qualms, he has no guilt. Interestingly, in an interview, a contemporary interview that's on this Criterion box set, Pasolini gives us an insight into his way of thinking. Remember, this film was shot in 1968. Now, this was at the height of the students and the workers going out on the streets of Paris, the 68, when a lot of leftist activists thought they could change the world. And later, famously, infamously, Pasolini said, I'd rather have been one of the police with a baton. Interestingly, mirrored here in this film, where Anne Wiazemski, who would later go on to be Godard's wife, of course, plays this bourgeois girl who's in love with Jean Pielow's character. And she's kind of an avatar of leftist activism. She's almost a kind of woke, right? And he rejects her and he says, God, I'd rather be in the SS. A typically Pasolini, quite a vicious, overt line. But then we're starting to see this darkness of Pasolini. And in this interview, Pasolini says, look, I'm more sympathetic to Leo's character than I am to Pierre Clementi or to Anne Wiazemski. So what we're seeing here is that Pasolini does not believe in rebellion for the sake of it, to being anti-society for the sake of it. That's against his creed. Nor does he really believe what Anne Wiazemski is doing, a bourgeois middle-class girl taking up politics almost as an intellectual fashion. He's got much more sympathy for Leo's character because Leo is driven to what he does, not because he wants to rebel or piss people off, because that's who he is. And there's a very interesting, very uncomfortable moment in this film. Leo has an extraordinary monologue in this film where he doesn't confess to the Anne Wiazemski character what he wants, pigs. But he tells her that he has a love in his life which no one else understands, but for him gives him everything he needs. Now, if you didn't know the plot, it sounds very much like a gay man trying to explain his position in a world which does not countenance homosexuality. It's a very moving speech. Pasolini problematizes it because you realise later on that this is quite a difficult and uncomfortable, urge that he has. And you wonder, did Pasolini know? He must have known what he was doing. This speech feels written by Pasolini, it feels from his heart. So you can see why Pasolini chooses to say, I sympathise with the Leo character, because he's driven by things in himself. Whereas the Wiazemski character and the Clementi character are deliberately putting themselves against society, one for absolute selfishness, and the other perhaps because she's deluded. That's the way the film makes you think. So you can see where I'm going with this. It's a very, very uncomfortable film. It's a very crude satire of Germany, where you have a character called Herr Hitzer. The other industrialist has a little thin moustache and a Hitler hairstyle. I mean, it's really, it's brutal and crude stuff. But we're starting to see where Pasolini is coming from. And in this year of 1968, I think this is a crucial film in understanding Pasolini and where he stands. Though he's a Marxist, he's of the left, he doesn't agree with where he thinks the fashionable middle class are going. He doesn't agree with just rebellion for the sake of it. And what you get in this film, and also the accompanying interview, is a deep sense of cynicism, a sense of loss. Interestingly, in the interview, Pasolini says something that really stunned me. He said when he started making films, when he made The Gospel According to St. Matthew, Mamma Roma, Acatone, he said, I was making films for a wide audience, right? And they were in the neo-realist tradition, right? But he says, now, I'm not making films for that audience because that audience has been completely sidelined. I'm just making a film for people like me, intellectual types. It's an extraordinary admission. I've never seen a filmmaker make that admission before. And so Pigsty it's both an advance and a retreat. And so there we can see Salo is coming into the view over the horizon, the darkness of Pasolini. It's a cynical film made for people of his stripe, his class and intellect, that is almost despairing of where the left is going, of where capitalist society is going, and he chooses to put as a hero figure or anti-hero figure a guy who's into pigs. I mean, this is a tough movie. One final thought for you before we leave this film. The German industrialist character, one of the people that Pasolini asked to play the character was Jacques Tati. I know, that blows my mind. Do I recommend Pigsty? I can't recommend it, really, because I think most people would hate it. Do I like the film? It's a very difficult film to like. Do I admire it and respect it? Absolutely. I can honestly say of the films I've watched this year so far, this is one of the films that stayed most with me. And at the end of the day, that's what matters, isn't it? That's what a true artist does. No matter how crude they get, no matter how, much of a sledgehammer they're using to try and make their point, a true artist leaves you with images and ideas that never leave you. And that's what I think about this film. Thanks very much.